The listening post on Meridian 7 had been built to be patient. It watched the dark and waited for sound the way a keeper waits for footsteps at a far gate. Tonight the dome was quiet, and the sensors hummed like a soft machine. Then the echo came back. It was not a voice. It was not a song. It was a pattern of tones and beats that fit together like a strange clock. For a moment no one moved. The array had heard everything before: trade chatter, old distress calls, weather reports from other systems. This echo was different. It felt made. It felt like someone had folded a message into the stars and closed the lid. Commander Isham Munir stood with her hands on the rail. Her breath fogged the glass. She had spent 20 years listening to the galaxy and learning its moods. This sound made her chest tight. It carried the weight of something late and urgent. "Patch it to the decryptors," she said. The decrypt grid was a patient beast of its own. It pulled at knots in code until threads came free. When the grid opened the echo, a simple line of words waited in the light. They were not words in any tongue she knew. They trusted rhythm more than grammar. Yet every translator in the room felt the same meaning. The pattern said one thing across all their minds: someone had sent a message too late. The message held three things: a name, a small phrase "we were wrong," and a set of coordinates that pointed to a place at the edge of mapped space. The coordinates were near the frontier where the peace accords had been signed 2 years earlier. The accords had been fragile. They had been the thin skin over a wound that might open again at any cut. The echo, arriving now, was a cut. News feeds that should have been calm flared like dry grass. Rumors raced along the trade lanes. The outer houses, who had watched Earth's rise with distant amusement, tightened their patrols. Markets slid as captains made quick choices. 1,000 small fears began to align into a visible pattern. Isha did not trust the council's slow motions. The Council of 10 met with ceremony and long speeches. In a moment like this, ceremony looked like sleep. She trusted the echo enough to act, but not enough to believe. The message could be a trap. It could be a mistake. Or someone could have shaped the past to make the present tremble. She chose a small team and a fast ship. Ruiz was the linguist. He had a quiet face and strange eyes that always looked like they were solving a puzzle. Anvar was the technician, a man who loved old radios and could make a dead wire sing. Myra was the pilot. She moved like someone who had flown storms and lived. They carried their questions and an old, patched ship that still had a kind of grace. They left before the council finished its first argument. That angered some people, but the team had a reason. The coordinates were not a place for speeches. They were a place for proof. The ship slid past ghost stations and long silent beacons. The echo sat in the ship like a small animal, making itself known in the hum of the engines. Ruiz replayed it again and again. Each time the pattern opened a new shade of meaning. It was clever in a way that made Ruiz uneasy. Whoever had built it wanted to be read in a certain way. If the listeners chose wrong, the message would point at guilt. If they chose another path, it would read as a warning. That choice, how people read it, might decide whether the peace held. At the coordinates they found a relay buoy, half buried in comet dust. It still blinked at a rhythm. Myra docked with calm hands as if she were returning to a close port. Inside the buoy was an archive. Holograms rose like old ghosts. They showed a bright day and faces, a signing, laughter. Then the image stuttered and shifted. The same scenes replayed, but cuts and edits made the faces look fearful. The hope in the original footage was gone. In its place, worry and plotting. Ruiz's fingers trembled when he saw how the edits worked. The manipulator had carved the footage and stitched it with other frames. They had used small tricks, a chopped moment here, a slightly different angle there, to change a memory into an accusation. Someone had made the past lie to the present. Anvar found tiny markers in the data, like a craftsman leaves a signature. The markers matched a known manipulator's style. He had worked in black markets and war rooms. He had sold fear as if it were a product. The files showed his hand. That meant this was not a crude prank. It meant someone had paid for a plan. When Isha tried to send the clean footage to the council, the uplink blinked and died. The trade channels were noisy and full of hate. Someone had cut a line that mattered. Panic moved faster than proof. They had a choice. Broadcast what they had and risk the manipulator planting more lies. Or follow the trace and hunt the source. Isha chose both. They would not play into the manipulator's hands by shouting first. They would move quietly to find witnesses who could prove what really happened. The coordinates pointed to a small moon where one of the delegates had retired. The town was a loose cluster of shelters and gardens. People moved slowly, as if the world had taught them to be careful. Jal, the old delegate, lived in a house that looked like it had been built around a memory. He was older than the records showed. His hands shook when he laughed. When Isha and her team told him what had come through the array, Jal laughed in a way that was neither gentle nor cruel. It was the laugh of a man who had watched many small things fail and wanted to test whether one more would. He asked them to sit and listen. He told them about the signing night with details a recorder might miss. He spoke of a dropped candle, honest words, and a tired hope. He gave them something simple and strong, a recording he had kept in private, his own voice promising peace. That voice, raw and tired, became a small kind of weapon. It was not loud. It had no edits. It had no power players trying to make it move markets. It was only a man who wanted to stop the world from starting a new war. Outside, the sky was full of ship lights and a heat that felt like waiting. The echo had arrived and set many small things moving. The team had a chip and a plan and a thin thread of truth. They did not know if that thread would hold. They only knew one clear thing: a message had come back too late. Someone had tried to unmake peace. The team would not let a lie finish that job without a fight. Ruiz listened until his head ached. The message kept folding into new shapes. Each shape told a different story. Each story blamed someone else. Ruiz felt the pattern like a cold pulse in his throat, clever, hungry, and meant to be read the wrong way. They left the moon with Jal's chip safe in a sealed case. The ship breathed out into slow space. Isha ordered quiet. The council channels were full of heat and rumor. Words moved faster than proof now. The team needed time. Ruiz set himself at the console. He played Jal's voice first. It was small and human, old and honest. That recording would not cut like the forged footage. It had no edits. It had only a tired promise. Still, Ruiz knew one true voice could be lost among a million false ones. He needed to find the maker of the false ones. The chip Jal had given them was simple at first look. But Ruiz had spent years listening to languages that hid in rhythm. He could hear the echo's fingerprints inside the forged material. The manipulator had not only cut images, they had wrapped signals around those images, subtle layers that pushed a listener to feel a single meaning. "Find the pattern," Isha said. "Tell us how they built it." Ruiz nodded. He worked like a man trying to untie a knot without breaking the rope. Anvar fed him raw feeds from the vault they had pulled from the relay buoy earlier, the one they had no time to study before. Those files were full of edits, of small splice marks and tiny digital signatures. Ruiz slowed the footage, listening to the space between frames. He watched the same smile repeated at odd intervals. He traced a faint metronome the editor used to hide cuts. Slowly the puzzle opened. The manipulator left a mark almost as a signature, a tiny burst of noise at a frequency most would ignore. It was a craft's fingerprint. Ruiz found the burst in 5 different pieces of doctored footage. It was not a single hand. It was a network. Whoever made these things had help brokers, shell stations, people who sold fear. Anvar ran the burst through his blacklists. He frowned when a name came back. It was a handler they had both seen before, a man who liked to buy conflict the way others bought art. He used straw accounts and old war caches. Ruiz made copies and hid them in 3 different drives. The manipulator had eyes, the team would not give them easy prey. While Ruiz worked the code, Myra kept them moving. She took the ship close to trade lanes and close to people who traded in secrets. They could not broadcast what they had. They could not trust any public line. So they listened to private channels, to whispers in dead markets. The name Anver found kept appearing like a black star on an old map. It pointed to a vault in dead space, a hollow place where corrupt fleets dropped dirty files like trash. The vault was a rusting husk drifting between 2 dead moons. It had once belonged to a charity that built life support for poor colonies. Now it was a safe house for lies. The entrance code they used was old and cheap, the sort of key a lazy thief leaves behind. Inside, racks of data and rusted servers smiled like teeth. The team moved through the metal bones with their lights low. They found rows of edited archives. Each file had that burst Ruiz had found. Each file had a buyer stamp and a delivery mark. They copied everything. The more they took, the clearer the network became. The manipulator did not act alone. He had customers and sellers and a hand in many markets. Then the lights on their helmets blinked. A shadow ship had been watching the vault. It came out of the dark like a thought turned violent. The ship bore no flag. It showed no face. It fired a single warning volley that cut the vault's power and made the old metal sing. Myra kicked the engines. The team ran with the copies pressed to their chests. Anver jammed open ports and pulled fuses. The empty station shook. Jal hummed something under his breath that sounded like the vow he had kept for decades. The shadow ship closed in and then opened its mouth wide, a net of small drones that fell against the hull. The team made it to their ship with sparks in the air and metal in their teeth. Myra shook the craft free and jumped into the lane like a fish fleeing a net. One of the drones latched to their hull and sent a message through the hull, a single word burned into their comm log. Watch. They had been seen. They had been warned. Someone powerful cared who touched the vault. Back in their cabin, Ruiz opened the files. He found an invoice trail. Small payments, routed through shell accounts, ended at a name that had once stood at the council's side during peace talks. The name was a surprise, like a cold hand on the back of the neck. It was a face that had given speeches about unity and held hands on parade days. The same face now appeared in hidden contracts with a financier who sold fear. Isha read the ledger with her jaw tight. If that name is right, she said, this goes higher than we thought. Ruiz did not smile. His work had found a map that led to a seat of power. The manipulator had not wanted merely to start a war. He wanted to make money from it. He wanted the council to be both the stage and the banker. The ship drifted under weak stars. The copies of the vault files glowed on Ruiz's console like small fires. They had enough to start questions, to wake sleeping watchers, to accuse and to be accused. They had a name that could rip the skin from the council or become a smear against their team. Outside, a shadow ship moved like returned wind. Someone had watched their hands. The team had to move while they still had speed. They would need to find allies and prove the manipulator's trail. They could not do that alone. Myra set a course for a distant listening post, a place where they might speak quietly and find ears that still cared for truth. As the ship leapt, Jal sat with his hands folded and said quietly, when you pull a thread, you do not always know what the cloth will do. His voice was a small, steady thing. Ruiz looked at the files and at the name and felt the cloth tremble. The manipulator had left his marks. The team had found them. Now the galaxy would test whether simple proof could stop a plan built on fear. The ship slid through night toward a place where their next move would begin. The translator had found a map, and every map leads to a door. Jal smelled of salt and old paper. When he laughed, it sounded like the ending of a long story. He was small and slow, but his eyes were sharp. The team knew then that history lived in him like a map. The moon where Jal lived was more garden than town. Wind moved through low trees and bent old metal into quiet shapes. Houses were built from ship plates and wood. People who lived here kept their doors open. They had learned to trust in small things after big things failed. Isha, Ruiz, Anver, Myra, and Jal sat around a low table in the delegate's house. A single lamp threw warm circles on the floor. Jal made tea with hands that trembled a little. He moved like a man who had worn peace like a coat and then left it on a chair for a long time. "You all look like you carry the sky," he said, and they laughed, but their laughs were short. Isha placed the sealed chip in front of Jal. "We found this," she said. "We need your voice on record. People are already believing the other footage." Jal pressed his thumb to the chip as if it were a small stone he had held before. His face changed. When he spoke, his voice left the room and went straight to the heart. "I remember the signing," Jal said. "The sky was thin that day. We were tired. We wanted an end. We wanted fewer names on lists, not more. I do not know how else to say it. We chose peace because we were tired of fear." He told them small things: the candle that almost fell, the laugh that came after a long argument, the way he had put his hand on another delegate's arm and promised quietly to watch over the borders. These were not great speeches. They were simple, human facts. They were the kind of proof that machines and editors find hard to fake. Ruiz listened with his head bowed. He recorded Jal on 3 devices and hid copies in jars and books. The old man's voice was soft and real. The sound of it on the recordings made Ruiz think of water running down stone. He could feel the difference between a stitched lie and a living memory. But memory is not always proof. People forget. People also remember only parts of a story. Editors take those parts and reframe them. The manipulator knew how to cut a life into pieces and sell the pieces as truth. Why would they do this? Myra asked. She reached for her cup and then pulled back. Her fingers were steady but her eyes showed the restlessness of someone who had flown through storms. Jal's face tightened. "Money likes noise," he said. "Some people get rich when others panic. When the world is afraid, the right doors open. I saw that then. I see it now." He paused. "But remember, I kept one recording. I thought my voice might not mean much. I kept it because I could not sleep otherwise." He pushed a narrow case toward Isha. Inside was an old data chip, worn at the edges. The team felt its weight as if it were made of iron. When Isha played it, Jal's voice filled the room again. It was not perfect. He coughed once. He laughed twice. But it was true. They planned to send the chip to the council. The council's public channels reached many places. If the council played Jal's voice in front of everyone, it could cut the manipulator's hand from the plan. It could show the world that the treaty had been signed from hope, not hate. They did not get far. As they moved to the uplink station on the moon, static touched the air like smoke. Lights flickered. The uplink tower spiked with noise. Someone had jammed the channels. The team tried every open frequency. They fed the recording in small pieces. Each time, the line died. Messages returned corrupted. The station warned them, "Too much traffic. Try again later." "Someone is cleaning the paths," Anver said, jaw tight. He opened panels and smelled the burnt tin of old wiring. He found signs that the jammers were not local. A signal from deep space had been folded into the uplink, like a knife under a rug. Whoever had done this knew how to hide their work. Isha felt the room close. Panic was a living thing now, moving with its own plans. The fake footage played on many feeds. People were already shouting for justice. Ships maneuvered at the borders. If they could not get Jal's voice out, the world would keep listening to the lie. They had more choices than simply trying the uplink again. They could go to other posts and try different routes. They could take the chip to a private broadcaster and risk giving the manipulator a reason to strike. Or they could go to the source, seek the other delegates who might still be alive and bring them into the light. Isha looked at each of them. Ruiz's face was pale with the strain of listening. Anvar's hands were raw from opening panels. Myra's jaw set like steel. Jal sat quietly and watched the sky for a long moment. "We will not let a lie burn what we built," Isha said. "We will carry his voice where the jammers cannot reach. We will find the people who signed with him. We will make the truth too heavy to hide." So they split their tasks. Anvar would work the uplink and try to find a clean frequency. Ruiz would map the manipulator's network from the vault files. Myra and Isha would take Jal and the chip and find the other delegates. If they could gather witnesses, those voices together would make a wall against the forged footage. They left the town under a thin moon. People watched them go with tired, hopeful faces. Jal walked to the ship with a slow step but a steady heart. At the door he turned and pressed his palm to the wood as if blessing a place. "Keep my voice honest," he said. On the ship, Ruiz loaded files and checked the copies again. The name they had found in the vault sat like a red mark on his screen. The manipulator had many hands and many buyers. The team had to move fast. As the ship rose, Jal looked out at the sleeping town. "When a lie walks out at night," he said softly, "you must pull it by the sleeve and show it the sun." His voice was thin but full of a strange faith. The team listened and thought of the path ahead. They had a living witness. They had reasons to hope. They had enemies who watched in the dark. The next step might be the hardest. But Jal's voice was with them now, and truth had a way of making people stop and listen. At the border, ships slow like animals that sense thunder. A single lie can look like truth there. A single spark can make whole fleets angry. The team moved into that heat, carrying a small bright thing, Jal's voice. The route to the border was crowded. Trade lanes filled with ships trying to be first or last. Markets smelled of fear. Patrols scanned every ship for hidden weapons. Isha kept their lights low and their papers cleaner than real. They used old friends' names and small bribes. Each false face they wore felt like a borrowed coat. On a neutral station they watched a scene that made their stomachs drop. A convoy of freighters flew human flags. It should have been safe. Outer House Marines hailed the convoy and boarded without warning. The Marines had a short clip on their screens, the forged footage, cut to show human delegates plotting a betrayal. That clip had been enough. The Marines seized cargo and held the captains in chains. Myra swore softly. Her hands tightened on the console. "They used the footage to make the law feel true," she said. "Now they act like it is real." The team could not save the convoy that day. They could only watch the panic spread. People saw the seizure and thought the worst. Traders closed markets. Families tightened their doors. The manipulator's work was no longer hidden. It moved like a shadow with its own breath. Ruiz worked their copies and fed them into secret nets. He mapped where the clips had first appeared. The path led through brokers and shell stations and to small accounts that paid for fear like one buys a tool. The money moved through safe banks and old war caches. The clean trail turned into a spider web of lies. The web tightened around a vault the team had found before a rusting shell in dead space. It held edited archives, invoices, and a machine someone used to stitch memory into new shapes. The vault's contents named buyers, small payments, and a single large investor who had set many of the deals in motion. That name surprised them, a financier who bought conflict and sold security as a product. Isha felt the ship get colder. "If we show this," she said, "it will blow a hole through everything they trust." They found the financier's paper trail led, in part, to a face they all knew, a council member who stood at peace tables and smiled in public. The thought made them sick. A man who promised unity might have been buying chaos. They did not run straight to the council. They were not fools. The manipulator watched many paths. Instead, they followed the small threads, the smugglers who shipped the clips, the stations that replayed them, the middlemen who made sure the right eyes saw the lies at the right time. Each step showed how simple fear had been sold. On a silent run to intercept a smuggler ship, the team found proof of the manipulator's reach. The smuggler carried crates stamped with charity logos and empty life support parts. In hidden compartments, the team found drives with short clips waiting to be paid for. Anvar scanned the metadata and found a delivery mark, a private node that only a few banks used. The same mark showed up in the vault's files. They copied everything and left before the smuggler could call friends. But someone watched them leave. A ship with no flag slid out from shadow. It fired a low shot at their stern, a warning meant to teach fear. The warning knocked out their secondary systems and left sparks in the corridor. Myra piloted like she had no fear. She twisted the ship and put distance between them and the shadow. The drone that came after them was like a black insect. It stuck to their hull and sent a single message through the emergency port: watch. The message meant they had crossed a line. The manipulator had noticed hands in his vault. He had shown them he could strike. The team's small victory felt thin now. They had proof, yes, but someone powerful wanted them quiet. They changed course for a hidden listening post. There, allies still existed, journalists who cared for the truth and traitors who hated being played. Isha planned to feed the vault files to those heirs. But she knew the danger. If the council member was involved, the manipulator might use the council's power to call them traitors. At the post, Ruiz built a safe package. He layered Jal's voice with the raw vault files and added the smuggler copies. He made a thread that showed how edits became evidence and how money moved from buyer to broker. The package was small, but it could cut a deep wound in the manipulator's network. They debated how to release it. If they went loud, the manipulator would strike harder. If they went quiet, the council might bury the truth. The team agreed on a middle way: release the proof to many small places at once, independent stations, trusted traders, and a few public feeds. A wave of truth, they hoped, could not be easily swallowed. Before they could send, the shadow ship returned. This time it did not fire to warn. It tried to board. The night filled with the sound of metal and alarms. The team fought with tools and a fierce small courage. Anvar tore wires free and used them like ropes. Myra dove the ship through a debris field and made the attackers miss by inches. They escaped, but not clean. Their hull had scars and their lights were dim. The manipulator had shown muscle. The team had shown they could move. Both sides had learned a little about the other. As they limped toward a hidden relay to scatter the files, Isha watched Jal sleep and the crew mend what they could. She felt the weight of the choice ahead. The proof they had might break a councilman's career or start a fight that killed many. The manipulator wanted war. The council might fear scandal. The team had the truth. They would have to use it with hands steady and eyes open. Outside, the border burned with small fires of panic. Ships shifted their headings. A false flag had sailed through and found buyers. The team had found the hands that built the flag. Now they carried proof to the world. The next move would decide whether fear or truth would shape the dawn. The council hall filled the sky with light. Screens hung like windows into a million living rooms. Everyone wanted an answer. The team walked in carrying a small, dangerous thing: proof. The council met in a round room full of glass. Cameras pointed from every angle. The members wore calm faces. Outside, feeds blinked with rumors and anger. The public wanted a verdict. Some ships readied weapons. Some markets closed. The team felt the weight of all those eyes. Isha asked to speak. The council hesitated. Their rules were long and slow, but the public watched and patience was thin. She stepped forward and did not shout. She placed Jal's chip on the table and opened a channel for all to see. Ruiz fed the files. He kept his hands steady. He played Jal's voice first. It was small and clear. The old man spoke of tired hope and a promise. That voice was honest. It cut through noise like a small light. Then Ruiz showed the vault files. He played the edited footage side by side with the uncut originals. He pointed to the tiny bursts of noise, the marker that matched the manipulator's style. He traced the money. He showed the smuggler receipts and the delivery marks. The screen filled with small, simple facts. The council member named in the files turned white. He had smiles in public and private papers in secret. He denied the charges in a voice that tried to keep calm. He called the files fake and cried for order. His words landed like stones. People listened. The manipulator had expected heat. He had expected quick anger. He had not expected the team to bring witnesses. He had not expected Jal's voice to sit next to invoices. He had not expected truth to move slowly across screens and find its own strength. Myra did something the team had not planned. She took the public uplink and opened a path that could not be closed easily. She broadcast the message that had started the trouble, but she layered it with Jal's voice and the unedited footage. The lie and the truth played together on every public feed. Viewers heard both sides in one breath. Watching both, many people stopped. The lie lost its easy power when the truth arrived right after. Captains on bridge consoles lowered shields. Traders unpaused their trades. Patrols that had drawn weapons relaxed their grips. The manipulator's neat line between fear and action began to blur. The named council member faltered. His allies moved like fish in a net. Some backed away. Some whispered. The public saw a man who might have used power for profit. That sight made a new kind of anger. It made people demand answers, not violence. The manipulator did not wait to be questioned. He fled. The financier vanished into dead lanes and shell accounts. The shadow ships that had chased the team melted into the black and took with them the network's head. They left only the small files and the stains of their work. The council called for inquiry. Committees formed. Old loyalties cracked. Some wanted quick trials. Others warned of chaos if the council tore itself apart. The world argued on screens and in halls. Truth had opened a door. Now the galaxy argued about what to do next. The team watched the noise with tired faces. They had done what they could. They had shown the proof and stopped the immediate spark. They had not fixed everything. The manipulator's money still moved somewhere. A shadow ship might still watch the borders. Old hates did not vanish because one file went public. Jal sat with Isha after the broadcast. The glow of screens moved like slow tides across his face. He smiled in a small way. "You made them listen," he said. His voice had the same tired honesty. Isha did not laugh. She had no grand promises. She thought of all the small choices that had built this fragile peace. She thought of the markets that had closed and the captains who had raised guns. She thought of the council member's face when the truth reached him. "We bought time," she said. "Not a fix. Time to decide." The council started hearings. Some members resigned. Investigations moved slowly and messy. The manipulator's tools were not all in one place. They were in pockets and nodes and human greed. To untangle them would take years. But the immediate danger eased. Ships that had threatened the outer houses turned for home. Traders reopened routes. People whispered that war had been averted. Some places cheered. Some places stayed scared. The truth had not healed all wounds, but it had stopped a burn from lighting a whole world. At night, the team returned to their ship. The hull still held scars from the chase. Anvar fixed broken panels while Ruiz checked data and Myra cleaned her hands. Jal slept in the corner with a small smile. The team felt thin and tired and oddly light. They had given the galaxy a choice. Before they left orbit, Jal took Isha's hand. Peace is not a thing you hold, he said. Peace is a practice. You must speak for it. You must listen. They had spoken. They had listened. They had shown how a lie could be made and how truth, when steady, could answer. The manipulator had failed this time, but he had learned. He would return in new shapes. The team knew that. As their ship slipped into the dark, a new message blinked on Ruiz's feed. Small and simple. A tone, like a note dropped from a high window. It was not a threat. It was not yet. It was only a sound. Isha looked at the screen and then at her crew. We will answer, she said. They had stopped a war with a voice. That voice had taught them something dangerous and hopeful, that listening could be a weapon for peace. The galaxy would be louder tomorrow. They would have to listen again.